Now let's turn our attention to a dime that quietly marked the dawn of a new decade in the U.S. Mint story, the 1971 Roosevelt dime. Though it may slip under many collectors' radars at first glance, this coin holds subtle mysteries and occasional surprises that can catch even seasoned numismatists off guard. From the backdrop of its release to the most prized errors, a closer look reveals why some 1971 dimes spark such excitement among aficionados and why others, though seemingly unremarkable, still carry a gentle premium when they shine in mint state. In 1971, America was navigating the aftermath of social upheaval, the space race's triumphs, and mounting economic pressures. Against that canvas, the Roosevelt dime, introduced back in 1946 to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt's legacy, continued its reign as the nation's 10-cent piece. Struck in Philadelphia and Denver, the 1971 dime came on clad planchets of copper-nickel over a pure copper core, reflecting the post-1965 transition away from silver. Though the design remained consistent, Roosevelt's profile gazing forward on the obverse, the unchanging torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse, subtle shifts in minting technology and quality control gave birth to specific varieties collectors cherish today. One of the most sought-after features among 1971 dimes is the presence, or absence, of the mint mark, D, which denotes production at the Denver Mint. At the time, Philadelphia had not yet resumed using a P mint mark for dimes. They continued striking without a mark. This dynamic makes a mint-marked 1971 D dime instantly identifiable, but even more intriguing are the repunched mint mark varieties. If you peer closely at some specimens, you might spot a slightly shadowed double D, evidence of a secondary, misaligned punch on the die itself. Finding a clear, well-centered repunched mint mark on a 1971 D dime can elevate a coin from a handful of cents to a few $100s, depending on how crisp that doubling appears and whether it survives circulation wear. Beyond mint mark oddities, another key rarity emerges in the double die obverse category. Though not as famous as earlier 20th century double dies, a handful of 1971 Philadelphia dimes exhibit doubling on Roosevelt's profile, the date, and Liberty inscription. Sometimes the doubling is faint, a slight shadow helping you trace a secondary line around the letters. Other times, it's bold enough that collectors can spot it without a loupe. A well-defined double die obverse example, designated as a classic DDO-001 in some collector circles, can command a premium. In top grades, MS 66 or higher, these dimes have achieved auction prices ranging between $2,500 and $3,200 over the past couple of years. Modest examples in circulated grades might still fetch between $50 and $150, a significant markup from face value. Of course, the broader question is how many of these error coins even exist. The U.S. Mint wasn't intentionally producing mint mark doubling or double dies. These were glitches, brief anomalies when a die received a second hub impression slightly misaligned. As a result, they're exceedingly scarce. According to recent registry populations, only a handful of 1971 D repunched mint mark dimes in uncirculated condition grade above MS 65, and many others show light wear or surface marks that diminish their appeal. For double die obverse, population reports show perhaps fewer than a dozen certified MS 67 or better examples. Such scarcity naturally fuels bidding wars when a prime specimen surfaces at auction. The year 1971 also saw occasional planchet issues, not clipped planchets like later errors, but minor flaws where small lamination separations appear. At times, a thin layer of copper-nickel might peel slightly from the core, leaving a tiny bubble or flake floating on the surface. Although these aren't as dramatic as a full-blown clip, they still catch a collector's eye. Depending on size and impact on the design, a dime with significant lamination issues can fetch from $20 to upwards of $100 in XF or AU grades. True mint state pieces that shimmer without blemishes and also show lamination quirks become conversation pieces in any collection. Beyond outright errors, genuine mint state 1971 dimes carry value simply for their condition rarity. Because billions of dimes were struck for circulation that year, finding a flawless MS-67 full-band specimen is surprisingly challenging. Full bands refers to those horizontal lines across the torch's reverse, each band fully struck without breaks or weakness. When these bands appear strong and the field's background are smooth, the coin tells a story of a planchet and die coming together perfectly. In the last 18 months, MS-67FB full bands, 1971, P dimes have realized $1,200 to $1,500 at auction. An MS-68 example, exceedingly rare, sold for roughly $2,800 as bidders recognize the perfection in the strike and luster. Transitioning from mint state rarities, let's talk circulation survivors. A well-worn 1971 dime, with Roosevelt's cheek rubbed smooth and the torch bands nearly merged into the background, might only fetch 15 cents to 20 cents, barely above face value. Yet even in this humble state, a keen collector might spot a low-grade repunched mint mark or faint doubling and set that coin aside. The real gold for the casual collector is inspecting rolls of these dimes and change without assuming they're all identical. Dimes that appear dull can still harbor mint mark peculiarities that elevate them above pocket change status. For a particularly engaging story, consider the case of a small-town coin dealer who discovered a 1971 D dime with an extraordinarily off-center strike, approximately 30% of the design missing, revealing an odd crescent of pure copper at the rim. Initially, the coin languished in a dealer tray labeled miscellaneous, Ms. Cuts, for a few weeks. Then, a local collector, whose grandfather once worked at the Denver Mint, recognized the trimming error potential and purchased it for a few dollars. That single piece sold online for $420, a tidy profit that highlighted how errors outside the classic double die category still generate buzz. Most out-of-center strikes on modern dimes don't reach these heights, but the rarity of a 1971 D with such a pronounced shift lent extra intrigue. Surprisingly, proof versions of the 1971 dime also exist. Though not produced in massive quantities, the San Francisco Mint struck a limited number of PF 40 to PF 69 proof dimes, packaged in sets for collectors. Because these proofs never touched circulation, they exhibit deep mirror-like fields and frosted details. Bootleggers sometimes slipped proof coins into circulation in the 1970s, hoping someone would spend a coin worth several dollars for 10 cents. A proof 1971 S dime graded PF 69 now typically sells for about $125 to $150. At PF 70, where every detail is razor-sharp and free from blemishes, a coin might climb above $225, though certified examples in that perfect grade remain exceedingly elusive. Collectors should remain alert for small planchet laminations on proofs as well. Tiny flecks of metal peeling on the surface can either detract from a proof's grade or, if they form an interesting pattern, spark a niche subcollector's interest. One such 1971 S proof, with a small frosted spot near the date that looks like a speck of dust frozen during minting, went through auction in early 2025 for $185 due to its unique appearance. Even blemishes sometimes become the very feature that drives value, provided they don't obscure Roosevelt's face or the date. As you file away that next 1971 dime, remember the anecdotes of collectors who turned ordinary finds into significant paydays, and consider that with each mint mark, each subtle imperfection, a fresh chapter in your collection awaits. And when you're ready, those tales will thread seamlessly into how these modern-era dimes reveal much more than 10 cents. They chart a mint's history and a collector's passion, all in the space of a small silver circle. Drawer. It might be more than just pocket change. It could be a key to unlocking serious value. Let's dive right into the story behind the 1982 USA 1 dime, exploring how it came to be, what makes certain examples leap off collectors' wish lists, and why some errors on this dime have commanded jaw-dropping prices at auctions. Back in the early 1980s, the United States Mint was dealing with two major shifts: rising metal costs and a growing interest in modern coin collecting. Tucked into this era was the 1982 Roosevelt dime, named after the beloved President Franklin D. Roosevelt, whose profile graces its obverse. The dime's reverse, featuring a torch flanked by olive and oak branches, symbolized liberty, peace, and victory. It had already been in circulation for 40 years by 1982, but changes in metal content were looming. That year saw experiments and adjustments that would make certain 1982 dimes stand out in a way no one expected when the coin rolled off the presses. Most Americans know the dime as a small, silver-colored coin worth 10 cents, and after 1965 the composition shifted from 90% silver to a clad of copper nickel. By 1982, the mint was carefully monitoring the rising cost of copper, which forms the core of each dime. The transition from silver to a less costly metal had happened years before, but 1982 felt like the tipping point, where even clad metal fluctuations mattered. A handful of coins struck that year slipped through quality control with minor variations, tiny inconsistencies that collectors today hunt for. These aren't just scratches or discolorations. These are minting anomalies so rare that finding one is like discovering a tiny treasure chest. One of the most sought-after varieties from 1982 is the small date versus large date distinction. You might spot a slightly different font size on the 1982 date or subtle differences in how the numerals sit on the die. The small date dime has digits that appear more compressed together, while the large date version has a bit more spacing, almost as if the numbers were stamped more boldly. Although these differences might seem trivial to an untrained eye, to seasoned collectors, they're clear signposts pointing to different die sets and potentially limited production runs. A small date 1982 dime in pristine condition can command a significant premium over its large date counterpart, simply because fewer of them exist in high quality. Then there are the infamous doubling errors, where parts of the design appear doubled, sometimes just on the date, other times on Roosevelt's profile or the torch on the reverse. This phenomenon, known as double die obverse, occurs when the die itself receives a secondary, misaligned impression of the design before striking coins. On a 1982 dime, you might notice a ghostly extra outline around the date or letters, a subtle shift that tells of a momentary hiccup in the minting process. Depending on the visibility and degree of doubling, these error coins can fetch prices ranging from a few $100s for a moderate example to several thousand for a crisp, dramatic double impression in mint state. Auction records for top-grade 1982 double-die dimes have seen numbers that make any collector's heart race. In late 2024, one particular specimen, graded MS 67 by a major grading service, sold for just over $5,200. Its doubling was so well-defined and sharp that bidders drove the price up immediately. Another example, branded as a small date double die and graded MS 68, crossed the block for more than $7,800 earlier this year. These records reflect not just the coin's rarity, but also the broader surge in demand for modern era coins. Collectors are hungry for these unique minting missteps, and they're willing to pay up to secure them. It's not just about the errors, though. Even normally struck 1982 dimes can be valuable when found in mint state with perfect surfaces. Proof coins from the San Francisco Mint, bearing the S Mint mark, were produced in limited quantities each year for collectors. A proof 1982 S-dime in GM-proof condition with deep mirrors and frosted details could quietly slip into a dealer's tray under $1.15 each sign, only to land on eBay later for upwards of $150 if graded PF 69 or PF 70. The contrast between polished fields and frosted relief makes proof examples instantly recognizable. And because only a fraction of proof dimes ever achieve near-perfect grades, they occupy a special niche in collections. Beyond the double dies and small date varieties, there's a subtler story of planchet flaws, tiny issues with the blank metal disc before striking. Occasionally, you'll find a 1982 dime with a clipped planchet, where a small sliver of metal was missing, leaving a crescent-shaped void. Though these aren't desirable to spenders, collectors prize them as evidence of a planchet mishap. Depending on how large the clip is and whether it affected the overall strike, a clipped planchet 1982 dime could be valued anywhere from $25 for a minor clip to $200 or more for a dramatic, eye-catching defect that doesn't obscure essential design elements. Collectors who own circulated 1982 dimes should still take a closer look under magnification, because sometimes the most valuable error is almost invisible to the naked eye. A faint repunched mint mark, where the P for Philadelphia shows a slight doubling of its own, can lurk on the reverse. True, most 1982 dimes don't have mint marks because Philadelphia didn't add a P to dimes until a few years earlier. But when transitional procedures occurred, a few stray marks show up. Even a slight rub from circulation won't hide these anomalies entirely. A well-defined repunched mint mark on a circulated 1982 dime might be valued between $50 and $150, depending on eye appeal and how clear the doubling appears. Of course, condition matters above all. A 1982 dime in first-year clad composition, struck on a pristine planchet, that's never been touched after leaving the mint can sell for significant money. A coin graded MS, 67 full bands, meaning the horizontal bands on the torch's reverse are sharply defined, might be sitting in a slab already, bringing $400 to $500 at auction. But if decades of chuck change handling have softened those bands, the same date could be worth just its face value plus a small premium to a casual collector, perhaps 15 cents or 20 cents if sold in bulk. And those sharp bands aren't just aesthetics. They prove once, and for all, that the coin never saw sticky fingers. Now, let's talk about an anecdote. A collector who found a particularly rare 1982 small date dime error tucked into a roll of change while grabbing coffee at a local diner. He thought it was just a worn coin at first until the dime caught the light, and he spotted that telltale doubled date. After an initial appraisal by a dealer who nearly dropped the loop out of surprise, the coin went to auction online and fetched over $6,500. That single find transformed what started as a $1 roll into a day that felt like striking gold. Stories like this ripple through the collecting community, prompting everyone to comb through their change and search those dusty coin folders and attics. So, the next time you hold a 1982 dime, remember that it might be more than a simple 10-cent piece. From subtle small date and large date splits to scream-to-life doubled dies and clipped planchets, this coin hides a world beneath its silver sheen. Whether you inherited a handful from your parents or just came across one in pocket change, a closer inspection under a loupe could reveal treasure where you least expect it. Stick with me, and when you're ready to uncover the next chapter, our exploration of the 1971 dime values and errors, we'll move seamlessly into that story, connecting the threads between these key years for modern dime collecting. For now, keep those eyes sharp and your coin folders handy, because your next great find might already be in your hands.